I was in high school, my extended family finally moved into a home with enough bedrooms for all of us, parents, siblings, grandparents. During a housewarming visit, my friend's mom turned to my mother and said, "How nice for Huda to finally have more privacy as she starts dating." Hearing the word date spoken in front of my mother sounded so scandalous to me. We were observant Muslims, and I had been taught that you meet your future spouse through your friends and family, or you meet disaster. After our guests left, my mom shook her head and said, "This dating business is so normal in these people's culture, they actually expect their daughters to go running around with boys." As the daughter of Iraqi immigrants, I was used to this kind of disconnect. My family had one set of values, my classmates and teachers held another, and I was comfortable swapping between both cultural lenses at will. Let me look at this issue as an Arab girl, now let me look at it as an American girl. Culture was the first explanation I turned to for why something was the way that it was. And moving between these two worldviews honestly felt like a superpower. I had access to two sources of knowledge of how to be in the world, and I could choose the best of both. I could take some of that Arab sense of hospitality and respect for elders and mix it in with the American sense of punctuality and willingness to wait in an orderly line. That one tiny word, "and," was a powerful force in my life. It gave me permission to be two things. And I wanted this access to two ways of being in the world, especially when it came to love, courtship, and marriage. Because there were things about the American love story that frankly scared me. It was all about sparks and chemistry, and who could control that? You either felt it or you didn't. Sometimes people could feel sparks for someone who was already in love with somebody else. Other times, people couldn't even tell if they were in love. It came as a surprise, even to themselves. "Because I love you, all right," somebody might call out in the middle of an argument. Love was the one arena where Americans, who were otherwise all about independence and autonomy, embraced helplessness. People had affairs and said things like, "We didn't mean for it to happen." Because love was this otherworldly thing. It was stars aligning. It was a cosmic connection that brought you to your soulmate, the person that completed you, the person that had you at hello. Arab love was decidedly less scary. You found a person who shared your religion and culture, and you made a decision to love them. And if it took a while for that decision to settle in, no problem. We have a growth mindset about these things. Give it time and your love will grow. So if there ever was an area in my life in which I needed the "and," it was this one. I wanted the security of a compatible partner, of a love that could get better over time, and I wanted the romance of the American love story. When I got engaged to the son of our closest family friends, I thought the stage was set for me to get the best of both worlds. Here was a guy who was an Iraqi American just like me, who shared my family's religion and culture, but who also grew up with the same ideas about American love. But our parents were committed to keeping things completely on the Arab side. This was all new territory for me. Not only was it my first time in a relationship, but it was also one of the first times in my life where I was struggling to find some balance between both sets of cultural expectations, and it shook me. Yes, my relationship with my fiance felt secure, but I also felt like I was being cheated of something that seemed unequivocally better. At the time, nobody was making any movies or writing novels about matchmaking and supervised courtship. Maybe when it came to love and romance, there wasn't really an and out there. It was just an or, and the American side was better, or at least more fun. It took me several years of marriage and honest conversations with married friends from all different parts of the world to realize nobody was having more fun and nobody was having it any easier. How you got engaged to your partner, whether it was in your living room with both sets of parents at your side or with a surprise down on one knee proposal, had no bearing on the lived experience of a marriage. At the end of the day, we were all trying to figure out how to stay connected to our partners, how to juggle an endless list of domestic duties, and later, for many of us, how to parent our children. Marriage made me see that I couldn't have the and when it came to love and romance because there weren't two things to be had. There wasn't one kind of Arab love over here and another kind of American love over there. Rather, all cultures contain a spectrum of ideas and attitudes. What I was really experiencing was the tension between conservatism and liberalism, community and autonomy, tradition and innovation that is present in all societies. The Arab view of love has many traditional elements, and it doesn't. There were plenty of Arab couples meeting on their own, dating, and getting married, just not in my household. The American view of love and courtship holds many of the same contradictions. There were plenty of American couples that I met that had just as conservative, if not even more conservative, courtship values to my family. And then there was this movement of people logging onto this thing called Match.com and finding their partners through databases that were acting just like the aunties in our community, sorting people by their pictures and background information. And those courtship practices that I was calling Arab were shared by so many other religions and so many other cultures across the world. And those communities were making their own apps. And so the boundaries between us were becoming more blurred than ever before. Those labels, Arab and American, were at once too broad and too narrow to be meaningful. Because cultural explanations are never the whole story. While we absolutely need some names and labels to be able to talk about our differences in customs and worldview, I needed them for this talk. But we still have to acknowledge that there's a limit to how far this discourse can go, and that it becomes a problem when we allow it to change the way we look at ourselves and others. When it came to my marriage, I kept looking for cultural reasons for why I was struggling. If only I'd had more of the American love story, my thinking went, then I'd be happier. But there were ordinary human reasons for whatever issues I was facing in the early years of my marriage, things that had more to do with my personality traits and family dynamics. Truthfully, I've always been a bit of a skeptic about love, and that's probably why that story I made up about Arab love was so appealing. And I'm an oldest daughter and a people pleaser, which is probably why I clung to my family's rules for courtship so carefully. All that time I spent looking at my relationship through the lens of Arab or American, all it had done was primed me to think in terms of contrast and opposition. I needed to get back to that and to become more than the intersection of two cultural identities. This is a tool I still need in my life. I remember overhearing two moms at my son's school, and they were joking about the crushes their kids had on one another in the first grade. And they were using the term boyfriend and girlfriend so casually in the first grade. And the Arab voice in me went straight to finger pointing. Look at them, starting so young, pushing their kids into the world of dating at 6 years old. Still, I didn't catch myself. And the Arab voice in me continued. They're always talking about us having arranged marriages, but they like to talk about setting up their kids too. Finally, my Anne voice kicked in and said, no, this is just a human thing we all do. When it comes to our children, we like to think about the what ifs and somedays. I'm standing here today holding out for a similar what if and someday for all of us. What if someday we flex our mental muscles to recognize when we are making our cultural differences the whole story rather than one small part? What if someday we reframe our thoughts and biases until we don't hear our culture's voice, our country's voice, our religion's voice, our gender's voice, but our common voice? What if someday we look around us without judgment, without any aim to note differences or similarities, but just to observe with interest, with respect, and with appreciation the things that all of us humans do? Thank you.